more a little bit in the beginning, but segments where you're going to have a YouTube video in the podcast. So we're going to be chopping up some of the podcasts, more of a true YouTube channel in that sense, and try that out and see that is. Look at what we're talking about. Baltimore Orioles best infield players of all time. So this is like, now we're deeper in the off season. We've talked about the lease, we've talked about free agency, etc. Orioles didn't make a signing, as well as remiss. Jonathan from the Kansas City Royals, so he should be in the bullpen mix. Orioles made a trade. So we're looking at that as well. Let's go ahead and talk about this. Some of the greatest players to ever play for the Orioles. Okay. Now, our Ravens video, I think, was easier to do. I thought it'd be easier to do in one sense because I've lived the whole Ravens life here, right? The Ravens started in 96. I was, 19 years old when the Ravens here. I've been able to watch the whole history. I've been able to watch everything. So I know all the Ravens players. Some of these players that are going to be on this list kind of predate time a little bit. Here's what was harder, it's definitely about the Orioles list for me, is that the recent years haven't been so good. So many times we've had to pull to the past to go ahead and get some of these great players that we've had. So we're going to do infield this week. Next week, we're going to do outfield and pitching, and we're going to go over who are the greatest players in Orioles all-time history as far as some of the great players. Real quick here, as far as the list goes, what's on the list? What's required? Orioles stats matter. So there are certain players that did well with other teams, whatever, that are all-time players, as we know, like Reggie Jackson. Like I saw in one, Reggie Jackson was a great player all-time, but only 1 year with the Orioles, something like that. Did you win a World Series with the Orioles? Did you actually have a long-term success, etc.? Those things matter. Okay. Gustrianos. Let's go backwards up. Let's do it right this. Matt Wieters. Kind of what we see with Adley. A lot of hype. This guy was a #1 overall pick. A lot of people thought that this was going to be one of the greatest catchers of all time for the Orioles. He's in the top 5. You might say a little disappointing considering the hype, but I think he overall a very good career. Guy could hit for power. Guy had a great catching arm. Not a super duper catcher, but pretty good. I thought all things considered, he had a good career. He's definitely top 5 as far as catchers. How about a little rain dance? Rick Dempsey, Orioles, one of the announcers of the Orioles, former announcers of the Orioles. Dempsey, I think, is one of the favorites. I think he's more beloved than maybe his on-field play would suggest. Dempsey was good in 83 World Series. I think that's it. He was the 83 World Series MVP. I thought he had a great career he was a defensive catcher. That used to matter more. Like a guy, I think it's going to matter again in the current game, but he was a great defensive guy. He was a guy that really was a leader on the franchise as well, kind of like right up there as far as leadership with Cal and Eddie at the time that he played. So Dempsey definitely makes the list. Long tenure with the Orioles as well. Andy Etchebarren, one of my mom's favorite players. Andy Etchebarren, long tenure with the Orioles. You look at the stats, Andy Etchebarren definitely belongs here as one of the top 3 players, one of the great catchers that the Orioles had. Definitely played early in good history here, early in the 60s and 70s and all that the Orioles had with catchers. More modern day, Chris Hoyles. Hoyles actually followed one of the guys who didn't make the list here, Mickey Tettleton. I used to love to watch Mickey Tettleton play as an Oriole, and Chris Hoyles took his spot. Chris Hoyles was fantastic. Chris Hoyles, I think he had a longer, steady career. Now, defense wasn't there. Power hitter. I think possibly the best power hitting catcher the Orioles have ever had on the list. Gustrianos holds every record, every catching record, every statistical record, every one. Have to put him #1. Gustrianos, one of the first catchers the Orioles had, and I still think the best catcher the Orioles ever had. I couldn't put Adley on as much as I love Mickey Templeton. He was below these guys as well. So, first base. Yes, that's right. Chris Davis. That's right. I looked at it so many times. I was so convinced that he wouldn't be on here. Statistically, I don't think he's been good. I think like we forget that Chris Davis, the years he was good, he had a lot of home runs. He was very effective. I definitely think Chris Davis is one of the best. Put him in the top 5 statistically. He absolutely belongs there. Jim Gentile. This guy was very successful with the Orioles. Definitely, you look at the stats statistically, one of the better hitters that the Orioles ever had. Contact hitter. That's what Jim Gentile was. Can hit the ball for contact back there. Very rare at first base. Rafael Palmeiro. Yeah, man. Absolutely would be in the Hall of Fame had it not been for the steroids and all that stuff. No question about it. He's one of the few. I think a lot of people over carried away with the steroids. I mean, he failed the test. I mean, I don't think there's any question about it. I don't think that takes away from his production on the field. I thought he's kind of underrated, considering how many times he hit 30 plus home runs, 100 RBIs. He was automatic for that for several years. The Boog. Another one of my mom's favorite players, Boog Powell. Old school home run hitter, power hitter. He had great barbecue for years out there, and he was a great compliment to Brooks Robinson. So I think definitely a true Oriole on this list. Definitely. You talk about Gentile, Palmer, true Oriole through and through. Definitely their long career power hitting numbers were outstanding, no question about it. Number 1, Eddie Murray. Maybe one of my favorite Orioles of all time. He's not number 1 because he's my favorite. Number 1 because he was a fantastic hitter, fantastic power hitter, fantastic eye at the plate. Defensively, he kind of I thought he was much better defensively than he ever got credit for too. Very good defensive player as well. I don't think there's any question about it. Look, Cal Ripken, when he won the 21-31. When he got the all-time record, he thanked his mom. I'll never forget. He thanked his mom. He thanked his dad. He thanked a lot of his teammates. He specifically named Eddie Murray. That's pretty high praise to have a guy that has that. Second base, not as strong in general, not as strong on this list, but we got some good players here. Rich Dower. This guy was a contributor for a many number of years. You don't see guys like this anymore. Like you see it nowadays, like a Jorge Mateo, a guy who's just a contributor, a guy who's like a pinch hitter, a guy. That's what Rich Dower was. This strength for so many years in the 70s, 80s. Definitely a contributing player at second base for so many years. Now you may know Davey more as a manager. I think he's one of the greatest managers that ever was, Davey Johnson. He was also a very good second baseman. I think he was so excited when he came here as a manager, got into it with the Angelos family. He was a good second baseman, kind of like the old school, like tone setting, good on his side of the field, could hit. Davey, I thought was outstanding, outstanding manager, and fourth on this list. Stat-wise, definitely belongs there. Roberto Alomar. So he was, I think, one of the best players ever to ever play second base. You go ahead and you look at this with Roberto Alomar, one of the greatest players to ever play the position, one of the greatest hitters of all time at the position. I think he's lower on the list had he stayed an Oriole his whole career. Some people like him better than Joe Morgan, but I think he thought maybe more as a Blue Jay than an Oriole, but he was fantastic his whole career. 20 plus home run hitter. I thought like he was also too outstanding defensively. Outstanding defensive player Roberto Alomar was. Brian Roberts. Shout out Brian Roberts. I think the only thing wrong with Roberts is what he was on some bad teams. This is what I see missing a lot of times in the league. Like a guy like Brian Roberts, a table setter. Okay, so many times now, like Gunnar may hit first this year. You get a Brian Roberts, he sets the tone. He's going to get on base. He's going to get you a bunt. He's going to get down there. He's going to allow. You need a guy that's going to allow you to drive those runs in and that's Brian Roberts. Brian Roberts stole a lot of bases, hit well, perfect, great leadoff man. Bobby Grich was fantastic for so many years. The name, just love the name, Bobby Grich. Then that's kind of how he played. He was kind of rough, tumble, yeah, very cool the way he played. Stats definitely belong there. Long-time Oriole, Bobby Grich, number one as far as the number one spot there. Two more spots. Tony Batista. So played a couple years with the Orioles, third base, hit for power. That's what he did. That's why he's there. Did a very good job for the Orioles for a couple years. Probably, again, one of these guys, kind of like one of their really good players in some bad years as well. Doug DeCinces. So going back a little bit more, but he was their third baseman. Had a tough job following Brooks. Had a tough job. So very good statistically, though. Doug DeCinces, no problem putting him in there. Doug DeCinces, he was in an era where they weren't as great at third base, so they had Doug DeCinces that was very good. They had trouble following him. He had trouble following a legend. Manny Machado, sweetest swing you'll ever see. Even now, Manny jumped off the screen when I saw him first time. I was like, man, this guy, there's no question about it. I was like, why did they bring up a guy from Double-A? Oh, that's why. That's why you see him. Manny was fantastic as well. Melvin Mora, I have him at third. He played so many positions. Most of his at-bats were at third base. He was fantastic. Another outstanding guy. Bit underrated even as a good Oriole. I think Manny was really good. I think Melvin was really good. Melvin could hit, period. I think he's a good hitter. I think you could put him anywhere in the order. And there's no question, the late, great Brooks Robinson, I don't think there's any question if he's the greatest defensive third baseman of all time. No question about it. Shout out Brooks, RIP Brooks. No question about it. Maybe Mr. Oriole to a lot of people. I don't think there's any question about it. Holds it defensively, not close. Not close to him. Offensively, pretty much not close. Better defender, I think, than offensive player. But make no mistake, he was a good offensive player. No question about it. Shortstop, Mike Bordick. He actually, again, replaced Cal at shortstop. Mike Bordick, I think, was better than what people thought he was. He's not going to get the recognition, but he was pretty good as a defensive player. A good, solid defensive shortstop career. I thought that's what he was. I think that's a good assessment of him. J.J. Hardy, same. Better offensively. I thought his offensive numbers popped at times. I think there was a couple years where he had better offensive numbers, where he hit more, where he did a little bit more. But I think that was pretty good for J.J. Hardy. I definitely think they belong on the list. I think he's above Bordick because he had better offensive numbers. Miguel Tejada was a phenomenal offensive player. Offensive player, all-star, outstanding. They actually turned it around. They actually showed a commitment. Actually, one of the last guys they actually showed a long-term commitment to, getting him from Oakland. Outstanding hitter for so many years. Hit for power, hit for speed. One of those guys, like, he out-hit the position. Shortstop, defensive position, he hit as well as anybody. Mark Belanger, so many years with the Orioles as a defensive shortstop. Definitely. Hey, look, you had Brooks at third, you had Mark Belanger at short. So definitely that was a great combination. One of the greatest hitters stat-wise, no question about it. And there's no doubt, number one, Cal Ripken Jr., the all-time leader of games played consecutive in MLB. Cal was superhuman. What the fact that he was able to do that was beyond. I mean, you wouldn't even think about doing anything today like that. He was superhuman. There was no question about it. Only thing about negative Cal, I will say, as great as he was, great, and leads pretty much every offensive category. Leads pretty much every offensive